All right, today we're jumping into a really cool piece of history, Edo Japan. We're going to find out how a whole country just cut itself off from the rest of the world and not only survived, but actually thrived. It's this incredible story of, creativity and just plain survival.
So let's start with a big what if. Just imagine for a second. What if your country was totally cut off? No internet, no planes flying in, no ships bringing stuff from other places. How would you get your food, your clothes, anything, really? Well, believe it or not, this was the exact challenge Japan faced. And they did it for over 200 years. So here's our game plan. First, we'll look at why Japan closed its borders in the first place. Then, the big one, how did they feed everybody? We'll check out how they made and moved all their stuff, see the super unique culture that came out of it, and then at the end, we'll ask the big question, was it a good idea?
All right, let's dive into part one. How on earth did this huge, kind of risky experiment in survival even get started?
Okay, so the key to understanding this whole period is one single word, Sakoku. It literally means closed country. The rulers of Japan back then, the shogunate, basically decided to just shut the doors to the world. That meant pretty much no one could come in and no Japanese person could get out. Wild, right?
And, that decision created a massive problem. You've got over 30 million people. So Japan had to become totally self-sufficient. That's a fancy way of saying they had to make everything they needed themselves. Food, tools, clothes, you name it. All from what they had right there on their own islands.
So what's problem number one when you're on your own? Food, right? You gotta eat. Let's see how Japan managed to feed that huge population.
So how did they do it? How did they grow enough food? The answer is actually pretty simple. Nearly everybody was a farmer. I'm talking a massive 80% of the population. Just think about that. That's 8 out of every 10 people you'd meet, all working in the fields.
And this chart really shows you what that looks like. Look how tiny that other slice of the pie is. Everybody else, samurai, people making things, merchants selling stuff, they all had to fit into that little 20%. Farming really was the foundation of, well, everything.
And the number one crop, the king of all crops, was rice. But here's the cool part. Rice wasn't just food. It was so important, it was actually a form of money. Farmers paid their taxes with it, and a lord's wealth and power were measured by how much rice his lands could produce. So it was like your food and your bank account all rolled into one.
Okay, so they solved the food problem. But of course, people need more than just food to live, right? With nothing coming in from other countries, where did they get stuff like clothes, tools, or even paper?
Well, the answer to that was the artisans. These were super skilled workers who made everything by hand. Since Japan couldn't just order things from somewhere else, these artisans and their skills became absolutely essential for everyday life.
And check out this quote from a letter written back then. It really shows how much pride they had in what they made. It wasn't just about making something useful. It was about making something beautiful, a piece of art. And that kind of high-quality work, it builds a real sense of community pride.
So what kind of stuff were they making? Oh, all sorts of things. They were weaving textiles for clothes and for those cool samurai uniforms. They were making incredible ceramics, like the super famous Imari pottery. And they were making tons of paper, which was so important for the government, for art, and for the books that were getting really popular. These homegrown industries were literally what kept the country going.
Okay, so you have all these amazing goods being made. How did they get from the maker to the buyer? Well, Japan built this really clever trade network just inside its own borders. It worked like this. Artisans would make stuff in their towns, then merchants would transport it all over the country on roads and rivers. They'd take it to the big cities like Edo, which, by the way, is modern-day Tokyo. And there, people could buy things with coins or even just trade for them. A simple system, but it worked perfectly.
All right, so now we have a stable economy, and everyone's got enough food. And this is where something really amazing and kind of unexpected starts to happen. Japan's isolation didn't just help it survive, it helped it create a culture that was completely one of a kind.
I mean, think about it. If you have no outside influences, no new music, no new fashion, no new ideas coming in from anywhere else, your own culture is just free to grow in its own special direction. The art, the theater, the stories, everything became uniquely, purely Japanese. This was one of the most incredible side effects of that Sakoku policy.
So what did this unique culture look like? Well, you had things like Kabuki theater, these super exciting plays with dramatic makeup and amazing costumes.
You have these colorful woodblock prints called ukiyo-e, which were affordable art that regular people could actually buy and hang up at home. And since more and more people were learning to read, books and stories just exploded in popularity. So it all sounds pretty great, doesn't it? But, it wasn't all perfect. Let's take an honest look at both the good and the bad sides of Japan being so isolated.
So yeah, there were definitely some clear pluses and minuses. On the one hand, what did Japan gain? A really stable economy, that amazing unique culture, and a strong sense of self-reliance. But what did it miss out on? Well, that's a big deal too. It missed out on new technologies happening in the rest of the world, it couldn't get popular foreign goods like silk or sugar, and it was totally cut off from contact with other nations and their ideas.
But here's the bottom line. Despite all those challenges, the system worked. It really did. For more than 200 years, Japan had peace, it was stable, and it was productive. When you think about it, that's a pretty remarkable achievement of organization and, human ingenuity.
And that kind of brings us to a final question for you to think about. When you look at our world today, how connected we are with global trade and the internet, could a country even survive like this now, let alone thrive? It's a really interesting thing to consider, isn't it? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.